Morning and a happy Erev Sukkot. So today what we're going to do is we're going to continue with the Shulchan Aruch, learn the laws of Kiddush, which of course are going to be relevant for tonight as well, because it's Yom Tif and we're making Kiddush. We're holding in Halacha 23, Halacha Chav Gimel of chapter 271, Reish Ayin Aleph in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. And then after the last 10 minutes or so, I want to share a little insight on Sukkot as a preview to the Farbrengen tonight. God willing, tonight is going to be Farbrengen in our home, in our sukkah, starting 10:30 onward, or whenever you're done your meal, come over. And the theme of the Farbrengen, I'll share with you a little bit of it, which we started learning this morning, Mayor. We'll share a little bit of that in the last 10 minutes of today's class. So let's begin. Halacha of Gimel in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. Doing it at a perfect time because it's a new section. Everything that we learned till now, you could begin from here without knowing anything prior. Because everything you said till now is all about the very particulars of making Kiddush, when to make Kiddush, how to hold the cup, how to pick up the cup, how to fill up the cup of wine, what happens if you're making Kiddush before davening, if you're doing it after davening, if you started your meal earlier, you're starting your meal later, all that stuff, covering the challah. And now we get to the interplay of Kiddush and washing our hands for Amritz. You can see some interesting phenomenon that you may not be aware of, and we'll get a better understanding of the particularities of our practice, which is kind of the theme here. As we learn the halacha, we learn scenarios that don't necessarily come up all the time, but we get a particular understanding of why we do things what we do. So let's see. Halacha Chav Gimel. Achar shekiddush ala kos. After he makes kiddush on his cup of wine, which we discussed at length earlier, Yital Yadav, Lesuda, you should wash his hands as he would in preparation for any meal. So the laws of washing your hands are not going to be here. That's going to be in Order Chaim. Sorry, well, this is also Order Chaim, but much earlier in the Shulchan Aruch, chapters I want to say it's in the early 100s. Here we're 271, I think it's early 100s for washing hands. Okay. And anyway, the laws are all there how to wash your hands, but you're going to wash your hands now because you're about to start a meal. And then you make a bracha on the til sedayim, which is the bracha we make every time we wash our hands for a meal. Okay, but now, im shachach, if he forgot, and natal yadav kaidem kiddush, and he washed his hands before he made kiddush. Now, in 126, they point out that the Alter Rebbe did not say here, if you washed your hands and made a bracha on the til sedayim before you made kiddush. That's not what it says here. It says if you wash your hands only, which means the halacha is about to tell us applies even if all you did was wash, but you hadn't made a bracha yet. What's the halacha? Then once he washes, lo yikadosh ala yayin, you cannot make kiddush on wine now. El ala pas, you have to make kiddush on the challah, on the bread. Why? By the very fact that you just washed your hands, even if you hadn't made a bracha yet, as per footnote 126, Gilo Daitai, you've now expressed your view, that the bread is more precious to you than the wine, which is why you rush to wash. And one is required to make kiddush on that which is more precious to him. This is based on our Gemara in Psachim, right? We learned this, that a person can make kiddush on either bread or wine, depending on how you understand the Gemara. But certainly one understanding would be that you have to make kiddush on that which is most precious to you. Now, for most people, wine is more of a savored flavor than bread is. But by the fact that you washed, savored flavor.
No, I'm saying they haven't had the sourdough.
Oh, but if it so happens to you that the bread is more endearing to you, more precious to you, then you have to make kiddush on the bread, at least according to one interpretation of our Gemara. Right? Because I remember our Gemara discussed that a person can make kiddush on bread or wine. And by you washing your hands, you indicated that right now you enjoy wine bread or more, which is why it's on your head. And therefore you have to make kiddush on the bread. Right? So you wash your hands and you have to sit down and go through the whole kiddush process, holding the bread in your hand instead of wine. And then you cut it up and eat. So I don't think you'd make Shalom Aleichem and Eshes Chayil here, because that would be an interruption, but you'd go straight to the kiddush. Presumably. If you didn't do this and you chose just to begin with, or you had no wine and you wanted to make kiddush on bread, but you had no wine, so you're making kiddush on your challah. Then before you wash, you would do shalom aleichem, eshes chayil, bezmal david, all those paragraphs. Then go wash, come back, pick up your challah from under your cover. By the way, remember you still have to have the cover because you have to like uncover it, unveil it for the Shabbos meal. So you say shalom aleichem, eshes chayil, go wash, come back to your table, pick up your bread, make kiddush, and then eat your challah. But in this case, you washed right away, right, indicating that you want the bread more than the wine, and therefore you have to make kiddush on bread now.
Talking about bread, we were on our Chabara yesterday with Florida. They were talking about the sourdough bread. I said, you guys don't know what sourdough bread
That's right.
is until you taste Levi's nice sourdough bread.
Yeah. So but now, so that was one interpretation of the Gemara. But Yesh Chalkan Azeh, those that disagree with this. But and they say, Shafilu lachatchila, even in the first instance, not in the case where like, oh, you washed without making kiddush, and now that you washed without making kiddush, you are demonstrating that you prefer bread, and therefore you have to make kiddush on bread. But actually, this opinion says that to begin with, you should wash before you make kiddush. This is also from a different interpretation now, or Gemara, from Tosfos. But they say, even in the first instance, you can wash your hands before kiddush. The kiddush mafsik, and the kiddush is not an interruption between the bracha of washing your hands and the meal. Because it's part of the necessary for the meals. Let's explain. So if you were to follow this practice, what you would do is you'd say shalom aleichem, you'd say shishchayil, you'd go wash your hands, make netilas time, come back to the table, pick up your cup of wine, make kiddush, drink your wine, put your cup down, and then go to your hamotzi. Because you washed already before kiddush.
Oh wow!
And that whole kiddush process would have not been an interruption between your washing and your meal. So it's all part and parcel of the meal. Remember, we learned this. We all go nu on, but it's not really what you should be doing. Right? The halacha is no interruption should be made between your washing and your eating, right, unless the interruption is for the sake of eating. So if you're saying nu on because I don't know, you want to tell something to someone, that's just as much as an interruption as saying the story outright. And if you're doing it because you want the person to pass the salt, all you need to do is say, please pass the salt. Because the salt is part and parcel of your eating. It's not considered an interruption. Right? We even learn that if you washed, you could even tell your family, please go feed the cow outside. Because that halacha is you're not allowed to eat before you feed the cow. So that feeding of the cow is not an interruption. So likewise here. Kiddush is not an interruption because you need to make kiddush before you eat. And therefore, in this opinion, you could wash before you make kiddush. And therefore, in this opinion, if you wash before you make kiddush, it would not demonstrate that you're interested in bread before wine. It could be you're just washing because you're beginning your meal. And you start to making kiddush afterwards and then pick up your bread.
Or you just forgot.
Sorry, or you forgot. But either way, it's not as if in other words, the first opinion was, once you wash, it means you love bread first and you have to have bread. And if you can't make kiddush on wine. But this opinion is saying, not necessarily. You can stick wine between washing and bread. And therefore the washing itself isn't necessarily an indication that you want your bread right now. Because you're allowed to put wine anyway in between. The wine of kiddush. Follow?
But you're not allowed to talk.
But again, you're allowed to talk if it's related to the meal. And kiddush is related to the meal.
Is the second opinion only if the person doesn't prefer bread over wine? Let's say
it's in any event. We're gonna see more. Sorry?
Let's say in fact it is true that he holds the bread more dear to him than wine. It's not
okay, that's a good question. And that's discussed in the next chapter, in chapter 273. Because there are some 272. There are some opinions which say that even if you prefer bread, wine is still better. This opinion that we quoted earlier says you have to choose the one that you like best. Other opinions say no, wine is always best, but bread is a backup. There's different opinions.
So if we do wash,
but the point over here is that there's an opinion which says that making a kiddush on wine is not an interruption between washing and bread, and therefore if you happen to have washed before you make kiddush, no problem. Make kiddush and then go back to your bread.
It's akin to passing the salt.
It's akin to saying, please pass the salt, which is not considered an interruption, considering that speech is necessary for your eating of the bread. Yeah.
So while he's cutting the bread, after he makes the bracha on the bread, we can ask, even before I eat my piece of bread, I could ask to pass the salt.
Correct. So long as what you're talking about is necessary for the eating.
Wow.
Yeah. again, colloquially, no one does it because people don't understand the difference between this and that. So the new became a thing. But really, it's like the new businesses.
What about if I'm missing?
What about amen? You have to say amen to a bracha?
Sure, that's part of the bread. That's part of the eating.
Sure.
You should make amen to my bracha. So if I'm making bracha on 2 loaves and you're getting a challah from me in a minute, you say amen. You should say amen. And when you say amen, you fulfill your obligation to have 2 loaves. Actually, Lecha Mishnah.
No, sorry, that's not what I meant. I meant, let's say you wash.
Yeah.
There's a queue of people washing. You hear somebody else say amen, let's it die.
Do you say amen? I don't remember. I think the answer is yes. I don't remember.
Okay.
But certainly the amen on my bread. For
Okay,
sure.
right, for sure.
Okay, so now let's see. Va'ikr. Now let's get this. Yeah.
Could you ask at the same time to pass the fork
For what purpose?
for the meal?
It's not for your bread.
No.
It's only what's necessary for the eating of your bread. Otherwise, it's considered an interruption.
So it's not the meal; it's the bread.
Yeah, well, yeah. The bread and halacha is your meal. So pass the knife, pass the salt. Did you feed the dog? Yeah. Did you take challah? Like a mitzvah. Okay. Now get this. Va'ikr kisfar acharna. The primary opinion is latter opinion, says the Alter Rebbe. Okay, there's a footnote 128, which we're not getting into, but we're going to stick with this. Because the word acharna is in parentheses. There's another version which says Shana, but we're going with acharna. Okay, va'ikr kisfar acharna. The primary is the latter opinion, which means, the Alter Rebbe is saying, the primary is that making kiddush does not constitute an interruption between washing and eating bread. And then he adds, and indeed, in this countries, in our countries, I'm supposing Ashkenaz, certainly Belarus, Russia, Ukraine, this is the custom. On every Friday night, they would wash before they made kiddush. I believe there are still communities that do that.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, the German Jews still wash before they make kiddush.
Yeah.
So they would say Shalom Aleichem, Eishes Chayil, go wash, come back to the table, make kiddush and wine, and then have challah.
Was that out of convenience? Maybe the water source was table.
It's possible. I think it's more to do with the fact that they wash pre-meal, and the meal starts with kiddush. Now, what they would have to do is they would have to dry their hands out very well after their kiddush, because Allah is not allowed to touch bread with wet hands. Allah is very strict about that. In fact, after you wash for bread, many people just wash and then their hands are still wet. You shouldn't do that. Halach, you have to dry your hands very well. So
because of the possibility of transmission of tameh.
No, actually, because of by the time you get to the water that's on your hand after you're done washing, it's already, that water is pure already because you've washed it off and then you washed it off a second time. And if you're Lubavitch, you washed it off a third time, right? 3 times when each hand. So the water you have there is completely pure. The problem is turning bread into soggy. One's not allowed to make their bread soggy because that makes bread. One's not allowed to like destroy bread. It's like wasting bread, and touching bread with wet hands does that. And that's the halach is very strict about that. So you'd have to dry your hands very well. And in this case, after your kiddush, you have to dry your hands very well because especially if you have, like we do, overflowing cup, your hand is wet with wine. Okay, so there is those who have this practice till today.
What happens during the sukkah and it's raining?
Yeah,
and when the bread gets wet.
It's a good question, and the best way to do it is obviously to take the bread out keep the bread under the cover while you're cutting it in a plastic. Yeah, I remember times when you served full meals inside like little plastic bags. Plate came down to you with a plastic bag, and you cut your food under the plastic bag and then take it out to your mouth.
Like Pesach style.
But like
bread in
not with the matzah in the plastic bag. But I've seen like chicken soup inside plastic bag and then take your spoon and pull it out of your plastic bag. So, I've been in sukkahs like that where it's like really coming down.
And for what I've observed, many people don't even know how to wash.
The laws of washing are perhaps another time we'll do a demonstration of how to properly wash.
Yeah. But
We need demonstration because there's so many details.
Frankly, my family holds by that.
Oh, because your family's German, that's right.
Yeah, exactly.
So they would wash first.
Yeah.
So Shalom Aleichem, Eishes Chayil, wash, kiddush on wine, and then hamotzi, right?
And when I go to visit them, they all ridicule me for doing it backwards, for not going there later.
And that's never right. So this is the main thing. Let's see. But Lavad Melel Pesach, with the exception of the Seder night, where they don't wash before kiddush. As will be explained in chapter 473 when we get there, because you can't wash before kiddush on Pesach and then not eat your matzah till after when? After you say the whole Haggadah. So over there we're going to learn the details about that. But every other night, Yom Tov included, they would do this. It's interesting. Your family does that. Very interesting. Okay, says the Alter Rebbe, nonetheless, So it's funny. The Alter was saying in our countries, this was the practice. Now he's not in Germany, which means I'm assuming that time it was all of Ashkenaz did it this way. Ashkenazi Jews would all wash before they made Kiddush. The Alter opens the window to not practicing it that way, and that became the Lubavitch custom, as we'll see. The Kamak nevertheless, my one who wants to be more stringent, little ad achar Kiddush, not to wash his hands till after Kiddush. I said, you're doing well if you do that. In other words, it sounds like the Alter doesn't want to outright say, I don't like the current practice we're all doing, but he's opening the window to saying, yeah, you're doing well if you skip the minute we all do here. Because again, you have to remember the Shulchan Aruch is not written necessarily for Lubavitchers. The Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch is written as a collection of all the halachic opinions from the Shulchan Aruch before him.
But this is Harav.
Correct, it's the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, but it was written for the world at large.
Oh. Okay.
For particular Chabad custom, you have an Alter Rebbe Siddur, and then you have custom passed down by tradition that the Rebbe collected. We spoke about this a while back, right? But the Shulchan Aruch was written, the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch was written as a collection of all the halachic opinions from the Shulchan Aruch's day till his for everybody. So when he says the custom in our countries, he means all of Ashkenaz.
Which was to do the washing first.
To do the washing first. But here he said, nonetheless, if you decide to forego that custom and wash after Kiddush, you're doing good. You're doing good. And don't protest his behavior, telling him, hey, you're transgressing the custom. Because ordinarily, that's what we do. Ordinarily, the halacha is you got al tifresh min hatzibur. It's a Mishnah. One does not, you're not allowed to separate yourself from the community. So if the practice in a certain region is to do a certain way, you have to oblige.
Wow.
But in this case, says the Alter Rebbe, if the guy doesn't follow the local practice, it's okay. Don't stop him. Why? Because the person can say, I'm following all opinions. Because we just learned above that there's some opinions which say that if you wash before you Kiddush, you have to make Kiddush on bread. So that was the first opinion. So I can say, look, the reason why I'm foregoing the minhag, the reason why I'm foregoing the custom is because I want to go by all opinions in halacha. Your custom ignores one halachic opinion, and I don't want to do that. So even though your custom follows a different halachic opinion, I want to make sure I'm covering all halachic opinions. So the Alter was already kind of opening the door to not following the local Ashkenazic custom, and this is indeed the Lubavitch practice. Of course, we all know we wash after Kiddush. Okay. So that was the halacha I wasn't sure you were aware of, but clearly you are because your family does it. It's German custom.
I was very shocked when I didn't understand what was going on.
The custom is not in
And
England.
they wouldn't talk. Like then they make Kiddush, and then they would have Kali right afterwards.
Right. With no talking of, because you're only allowed to talk about that which is necessary for your meal.
Yeah.
And Kiddush is necessary for your meal. That's it.
Yeah.
Now here's my question for you. But everybody around the table make Kiddush, or only one guy and everybody answer Amen?
Everybody answered. Nobody made their own Kiddush.
Because they wanted to minimize the separation. So once you fulfill your obligation, now you're making your own Kiddush. That's already a longer interruption from the reason. So they have one person, that's my guess.
Right.
One person would make Kiddush, everybody would answer Amen, and then go straight to Challah. That way they would minimize the interruption between washing and eating the bread. That would make sense.
When we were just now in Yerushalayim, my uncle Nathan, my uncle and aunt came from London, and we went to David Citadel for our Shabbos lunch.
Yeah.
They washed before, and then because
that's their custom.
Exactly. So then they made Kiddush, they didn't speak, and then as soon as they had that was it.
Okay, so now I want to tell them to do this. Now, everybody agrees. Everybody agrees that even if you're of the view that you're allowed to make Kiddush after you wash your hands, you certainly cannot dilute the wine after you wash your hands. So we don't have to do that anymore because our wine's already pre-diluted. But in the old day, we were taking wine right out of the vat. It's too strong, you got to dilute it. Otherwise, it's not drinkable. So this opinion saying, do that. Even if you allow Kiddush to be done after you wash, don't do that whole dilution process after you wash. Make sure that's done before you wash. Why? Because you have to be very, very precise that you don't have too little water and don't have too much water. That is a hefsek v'hesachadas. And that precision, which requires concentration, would be considered distracting your mind from the meal, which you have to be focused on from when you wash till you eat. You have to be focused on your meal so that your hand don't touch something it's not supposed to touch. And this precision takes too much concentration, which would distract you, and therefore don't do that. Okay, here's the thing I want to ask you. It says, in the first instance, one should be careful if you decide to wash before your Kiddush. Even pouring from the pitcher, from the bottle, into your cup, should be done before you wash to minimize interruption. Which means, Shalom Aleichem, fill up your cup with wine, go wash, come back, make Kiddush, then eat challah. Do they do that? Or do they fill up the cup after they wash?
I think they fill it up after.
He doesn't say you have to. He says in the first instance, it's best to be particular to fill up your cup before to minimize interruption. But he doesn't say you have to. He says you can, because it doesn't take so much precision to fill up your cup.
Right.
So I was wondering if they.
Yeah. No,
Seems like
I
you
don't-
have to be more careful when you wash before Kiddush.
to make sure your concentration stay, that you're not
So you don't fall into interruptive
correct.
practices.
Which is why he's saying, even though you may fill up your cup after you wash, best to fill it up before. So I was wondering if you're
Right. Is that
Ask them.
Yeah, that mixing thing is. I've seen some places some people might have to keep like a little bit of water inside the cup.
That's a different thing. My father does that.
Right.
You're supposed to rinse out the cup of water, the cup that you're making kiddush. My father leaves a little bit of water, and some people take the water and pour it into the bottle. Whatever, it's a different story.
But nothing to do with the mixing that we just said for
No, no.
fortified wine.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Right.
Okay.
Itchy puts a drop of water into the bottle.
Yeah, my father does the same.
Father puts it into his cup.
He rinses it out, then I think he pours it into the bottle also.
Because it's Rebbe wine.
No.
Or nothing to do.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop over here, and then I'm gonna stop the recording and then restart the recording and share something about service.
I love this.